Thank you so much for tuning into my show, William Wallace for America. I am grateful for your time that you're spending with me. Today's show is brought to you by the Wellness Company. Please go visit the Wellness Company at twc.health/WWFA to find products that are natural and with a company that believes in not only quality products, but products that will help you exercise your medical freedom. In this episode of my show, I want to begin by asking a couple questions. I've got some thoughts on those, and then we're going to do some memes for the rest of the show that come with a lot of thoughts pertaining to the shutdown. My first question for you is, why in the world do they keep talking about SNAP and all of the people that are not going to get fed, and how horrible it is that SNAP is not going to get funded? And they keep talking about how many families the government shutdown is going to hurt because they aren't getting SNAP or welfare to those families. That seems to be the hot question and the hot topic. But my question for my listeners and for people in charge is, why isn't anybody talking about the amount of Americans that need SNAP? Why isn't that anybody why is nobody talking about, rather, how many Americans are not only in need, but why they are in need? Why do we have so many Americans on SNAP? Why do we have so many people that need food assistance in our country? We're talking about government spending, we're talking about government food programs, but nobody is talking about things that the government should have done a long time ago to be able to help Americans prosper and not need SNAP. Why is anybody talking about less government regulations that allow people to be able to participate in the free market system more efficiently so they can prosper in a way where they won't need SNAP, particularly won't need government assistance? We're talking about how important it is for the government and how many people are going to be affected by government shutdown, but nobody is talking about how we got to where we are today and what the government should have done a long time ago, or what they should be doing to get people off of the SNAP program, off of assistance, and why and get them off of government programs. That being said, I've got some other things to mention to you. The next thought that I think pertains heavily to this shutdown is, who really runs our country? We've got Congress and the Senate voting for the spending bills. We got Congress and the Senate fighting over control over, and look, and right now it's all about who's going to control, who's going to poke who in the eye, who's going to, who is really to blame for the shutdown. They're trying to hurt each other because that is where their power lies. Then we hear the stories of the president who is, the federal court stopped them from doing this, or the Supreme Court stopping them from doing that. The Supreme Court says they have to fund it, or the lower court says they have to fund it. The Supreme Court says no. I've got that article I'm going to read to you in a minute. Bear with me because I'm on a run right now, because it infuriates me that the focus is on the people being hurt by a shutdown when the real focus should be on why do we have so many people that need government, but now also why do we have the federal courts involved? Our president, of course, he's the president, but they're fighting over these court battles to be able to help the American people. It is brain numbing that while their main topic is, we need government to open back up. We're so reliant on government. We need government to open back up. But nobody is talking about how to get people off of government. It's all about, how can we get government back open to get everybody back on the government dole? It's not, hey, how can we get people off of the government dole? How can we get people off of government assistance and be able to get them to be able to prosper for themselves, because people will do better if government got out of the way. And if government got out of the way, they would lose control. Hence the reason they need us. They need us dependent on it. I've got some thoughts here that I'm going to bring up to you in memes. The first one, if you keep people exhausted and distracted, they won't organize. If you keep them struggling and divided, they won't resist. The system isn't broken, it's working as designed, which we are seeing because they are stealing. How no, they're not stealing. They are robbing us blind. I know, same thing. Robbing just sounds more dramatic, I guess you could say. They are robbing us of our time and our prosperity because they control us with the handouts. And think about this. They're not just controlling the people who are on government assistance and work for the government. They're controlling the rest of the population of America because they've got you distracted with this government shutdown. They've got you fighting over who's in control, who's not in control, who's really to blame. We're all distracted even though we're not on a government assistance by watching the theatrics of it all. And that is how they control all of us in there while they're doing this to us. And again, no one's talking about the what government should be doing to get people off of the government dole. I know we have government services that don't involve people being on public assistance and don't involve people who are we got people who work for the federal government. I get it. I understand all of that. And they have their jobs and they were promised those jobs. But they're being manipulated in all of this because they're not getting paid. So it's almost like the people who were reliant on government assistance to eat or have food or whatever other social programs are on. The people who work for the government are being controlled because now they can't pay their own rent because they got their jobs that aren't being funded. Even those people, I understand they work for the government legitimately. And what I mean by that is maybe they're Army Corps of Engineers, maybe they work for a government bureaucracy or program, the CIA, the FBI, or whatever the case may be. But now they're being manipulated by government control. They might have alternatives in the private workplace, but in this case, they're controlled. So let me see if I can get some of these memes up here. Before Biden, this is another meme. Before Biden, we had 17,194,000 people on SNAP. After Biden, we have 41,703,000 people on SNAP. I'm not going to read what all the meme says, but you get it, because I don't look at these programs as I use the word dole, and I don't even like to say, we have people that are hooked on government in the negative connotations kind of way. I don't want to use that because there's a lot of people who truly need it. There's a lot of waste and a lot of fraud in the system. I got some points on that here in a minute, but there's people who really need it. So I don't want to make a blanket statement, but I think and would be willing to bet you that there is a large percentage of people that should not be on SNAP or food assistance, and then they get to become political pawns while they are using the government. They also become pawns of the system when the government shuts down. I know if they don't need it, they shouldn't be hurt by the shutdown. Yet the federal government is going to use them as an example, or the politicians on the Democrat side are going to use them as examples in the numbers. We have X number of people on food assistance. They don't care what percentage of them shouldn't be on it. They're going to use them anyway. I got another. So this meme, back to one of my earlier questions, which is who's really controlling the government right now. And of course, the focus is on the House and the Senate side of this, where the House has already passed a resolution and the Senate has not. And everybody says, well, if the Republicans control the Senate, then why can't they pass it? So what happens there is that news narrative says, well, the Republicans control the Senate and the House. It's their shutdown. Well, the reality is that while they do have control, they do not have control of this. They not that. They do not have control of this. They don't have control of the voting procedures in the Senate. While they have the majority in the Senate, the rule that's being followed right now, I'm gonna read this. In the House, a simple majority is good enough to approve legislation. But in the Senate, most bills, including the spending bill currently on the table, need to secure the support of at least 60 senators. That's because 3/5 of the Senate must agree to end the debate phase. That takes place before legislation is put to a vote by the chamber. Without meeting this 60 vote threshold, the bill's progress stalls. Once the Senate advances to a vote on the legislation itself, this final ballot only needs a simple majority. So they need 3/5 on a spending bill, which is what this is, which is why, even though the Republicans have the majority, they don't have the 3/5 needed, which is why they need Democrats, which is why it is indeed behind the scenes a Democrat shutdown and not a Republican one, because the news media, for the most part, doesn't tell you that this 3/5 rule is needed in the Senate, which needs Democrats. They just tell you the Republicans have control and they're not doing it. Hence the reason. This goes back to my next meme, which says, do the math. It requires 60 votes to pass the CR because of the voting bill or because of the rules. 53 Republicans, 2 independents, 43 Democrats. 53 plus 2 equals 55. This is on the meme on the video side. Now, is 55 more than 60 or less than 60? The answer is less than 60. 60 minus 55 equals 5. We need 5 Democrats to vote yes on the bill. Since all Democrats are voting no, it is a Democrat shutdown. And next up on the next meme up, I like this is a funny one. It's a guy with a funny looking face on him. It says, "Wait, am I the only one buying my own food?" So I just explained how the Democrats are to blame for the shutdown. So they're the ones that are manipulating the food programs, but they make it sound like everybody in America is reliant on the government for their food. And that's all they focus on because food is how shall we say, food's important, no doubt, but nobody wants to think about starvation. Nobody wants to think about people who don't get fed, which happens very little in America. But this one meme that says, am I the only one buying my own food? That's what they make it sound like. My next meme from Magade Wade is on X. The best way to keep people poor, convince them their poverty is someone else's fault and only the government can save them. Exactly what we see happening here in America. Congress, the House and the Senate keeps telling you it's the Democrats' fault, it's the Republicans' fault, it's their fault, they're the ones harming you. But hey, if we open everything back up, government's going to save you. Meanwhile, people are starving, theoretically speaking. People are hungry, theoretically speaking. People are en masse, but in the masses, affected by the government shutdown. Everybody's affected in some way because of some programs that are shut down. So the perception that only the government can save us is there. But if we, the people, would not have spent the past bunch of generations allowing elected officials to build bureaucracy, grow government, create all these programs for the greater good, we would not need them to be open now. We'd be a thumb on our nose and say, don't need you. We got you. Which, in reality, if you look around, how much is your life actually affected by this government shutdown? Most people, it's really not. Most people are going about their daily lives. I get it. There's employees of the government not getting paid. They're going to get their money back when the government opens back up. Let's just hope that in the meantime, their rent and they don't lose their apartments or their cars as a result in the meantime. But government has convinced us with this shutdown, it's all planned, how much we need them, how much they're here for us. My next meme, it's amazing if you go from anti-government to where are my food stamps in just 5 days, you might be a liberal. My point on reading this meme wasn't to point out who the liberals are. It's actually where everybody is. Even the conservative Republicans are now distracted with the argument about the government being shut down and who's getting food stamps, who's getting food snap, who's getting relief. They're coming up with the memes on how many illegal immigrants shouldn't have it, who shouldn't have it, which I completely agree with, that there's a lot of people who are getting it that shouldn't be getting it. There's a lot of fraud in the system. But we, the people, could stop that if we all became more self-reliant, a conservative value. But that being said, it's amazing to me that how in 5 days or whatever days it is now, that the narratives of not feeding people have caused everybody, whatever side you're on, whether you're getting assistance or not, to be distracted on this issue. And even if you're not affected by the food programs or the government shutdown, you're still distracted and controlled, which is a shame because the government has set it up this way intentionally. So we're all distracted. And in the meantime, the elected officials gain power because they're using all these programs to manipulate the minds of the American people for more control, not only in their office, but in future elections. My next meme, a picture of Donald Trump and George Schumer, or Chucky Schumer, rather. It says, breaking, President Trump just used $750 million in tariff money to keep food aid flowing for women, infants, and children during the Democrat shutdown. This goes back to one of the next points I made earlier in the show, or my second question, that is, when I said, when I talked about the not only the programs and the bureaucracies, I'm saying this slower for a reason because I want you to go back and follow with me. When I refer to the bureaucratic agencies that are controlling us, the politicians that are controlling us, the programs, food assistance programs are controlling us, and the courts controlling us. So now my question, which I'm going to read this article here in just a second, goes back to if the courts are now, if you can file a lawsuit to have a program funded or not, why do we need the elected officials to do the voting? We can just file lawsuits in the courts. But does that give the courts too much power? It does. Our founding fathers didn't want the courts to have this much power to control policy, to control the people in our country through the courts by simply somebody being able to file a lawsuit or not. Likewise, our president should not have to rely on the court system on whether he can put something through or not, or whether the politicians, whether they vote, if they're going to vote on it, can the court still override it? In today's world, the answer seems to be yes, because of all the court cases that are coming out when the president makes a decision or when Congress makes a decision. They seem to be grasping for more control. This article by Alex Woodward of the Independent. Supreme Court blocks full SNAP payments after Trump appeal for now. The Supreme Court temporarily blocking a judge's order requiring Donald Trump's administration to fully fund a critical food assistance program that has stranded millions of Americans and their families after the government failed to keep it afloat at the start of the month. My point exactly. This way it's worded makes it sound like there's just millions of Americans who are starving in the street as a result, which simply, I'm sorry, is not true. If it were true, we would see the images of people starving in the street every night on the evening news, and they would be saying, look at this people, they're starving. And then if they allow them to starve, they're just as guilty, which I don't put it past the mainstream media to do that these days. But the narratives are stronger than the facts. The narratives outweigh what's really happening. We get distracted, and as a result, we all get controlled by whether SNAP is funded or not. Back to the article. It says, but the administration is simultaneously telling states that it will immediately begin funding the Supplemental Nutritional Assistance Program after a week-long lapse, the first in the program's 61-year history. Nobody's asking why we need this for 61 years, and it's growing in numbers continuously. No one's asking what are elected officials doing wrong in our country that more and more people have to get on food assistance. What are elected officials doing wrong? What's our government doing wrong? What are our bureaucracies doing wrong that more and more people need to be on assistance? And the numbers are growing every year, partly because elected officials continually use these programs to not only build their base, but control more people. You can't say it enough. Back to the article. A federal appeals court rejected the administration's emergency request Friday night, leaving the order in place to fully fund SNAP for November. The administration then swiftly appealed to the nation's high court, which hours later granted Trump's request to temporarily freeze the judge's order while the legal challenge plays out at the appellate court. This, my friends, is the example I'm making when our elected officials can go through the courts because Congress is too busy failing us on votes because they're fighting over more control and the narratives. It's a shame that our elected officials, our Trump president has to go through these steps. But at the same time, some people might cheer it and say, look, it's great that we have courts stepping in to oversee because we don't want kings. The problem is you might not want a king, but by giving the courts more power, you are creating fiefdoms. And fiefdoms, my friends, are able to oftentimes create more centralized control on many issues instead of putting the blame or putting the responsibility back on elected officials. Because if they do wrong, we at least notice it and have a chance of voting them out in the next election. And as a result, that, my friends, is the better way to go than through the courts, not just because we're giving the courts too much power, which we're doing, but because we're not holding our elected officials accountable on their decisions because you're giving the power to the courts. You see, smoke and mirrors. My next meme says if 40 million Americans are about to lose their food stamps, then this should be a warning to everyone why socialism and communism are such a danger. A government that can feed you, and I'll add, can also control you, can also starve you. We are giving our government too much control. We're giving them too much credit. That, my friends, is the road to communism and socialism. As you know, I always like to say, I don't like to use those examples too much, but because communism and socialism sound like extreme conspiracies, because oh, we live in America, whether you're liberal, Democrat, oh, we live in America. We're not communists. We're not heading that direction. That's those conspiracy theorists saying that. But the reality is, what we're experiencing right now with this much government control of feeding people, which, as I said earlier, I really don't believe that we have that many people that are truly in need, they're going to starve without government. Yes, I know there are some that are very reliant on the programs, which is a smaller number. The other remainder of the people that either shouldn't be on it, don't need to be on it, aren't going to starve without it, those are the ones that we need to have better opportunities for in America so they don't try to use it. I know you're always going to get the scam artist, but the reality is we keep going back to giving the government more control, in this case over our food. When a government has this much control over food, that, my friends, is the definition of communism. And that is not a conspiracy. That is where this gets headed if we keep allowing these programs to get bigger and bigger every year, and we keep allowing our elected officials to have more and more control over these programs, which I know that's their constitutional duty, but we the people allowing ourselves to be manipulated by it are giving them more control over our food supply in the future. The next one is a picture of a cartoon character. It says, food feels expensive because your taxes are feeding 40 million other people. Bingo! Your taxes go up. Government relies on you more. They squeeze you a little bit more in taxes. But the other reality is it takes, when government is feeding more, is paying for food for more people, it takes a huge chunk out of our free market system. And when government is the biggest customer and they're paying the price no matter what, and usually more, and government procedures, will say, government processes are always costing the people more money than capitalism does. Capitalism always does it as cheap as it can to increase profits. Government doesn't care because it doesn't have to make a profit. So when government is buying more food, theoretically speaking, through these programs, food becomes more expensive because competition in the free market system is artificial. The people, my friends, suffer in this direction also. Let's also not forget, here's another one, the guy from The Office, I think it is, with his little whiteboard on this next meme. If government shuts down means you'll go hungry. You have become too dependent on your neighbor's tax dollars. Kind of a repetitive meme, but you can't repeat this too much. Picture of Albert Einstein. It's not a quote, it just has him. I'm sure he did not make this comment, but that's what's on the meme. FYI, welfare and food stamps were intended to be your safety net, not your lifestyle. Back to my point earlier, our government has engineered the bureaucratic system and the power of our politicians to make us more dependent and reliant on government instead of having it as a safety net. The minute you get rid of that safety net and the minute you expect and demand your politicians to do better with policies that strengthen the free market system, that strengthen freedoms, empowers us with our own freedoms and liberties to get out there and be able um, to do for ourselves, we don't need them, that safety net. That's just in case of an emergency for some people, is how it was designed. Or was it actually designed for control by the politicians? Like LBJ said, we'll have these people voting for us forever. The next meme is a picture of John Thune standing in front of Congress. Says, holy smokes, Senator John Thune just exploded on Democrats. We've tried 13 times to fund SNAP and WIC. You voted no every time. Now you realize there are consequences. Yeah, it wasn't a great meme, but you get the point. The next meme is a quote by Michael White of Arkansas Liberty. He says, my friend just told me that his coworker was on the job site pissed about SNAP going away, saying, man, now what am I going to do? My friend asked, don't you make too much money for that anyway? The person's reply was that he buys $2,000 worth of SNAP a month for $500 from somebody that was on SNAP, but now they're going to have to pay full price for groceries. That, my friends, is just one example of many of the fraud that's in our SNAP program. Not only is the illegals, but the amount of fraud within our SNAP program needs to be reevaluated. And maybe we do need to bring it back down to zero where nobody's getting it and make everybody reapply. This is a map of the United States, shows the red states. It says food stamps grew 40% under the Biden administration. One reason is that blue states ignored the work requirements. Might I point out here that the states have become dependent on the federal assistance that they get to their states for these programs, and it just becomes a slush fund. It just becomes money laundering. The federal government creates the program, the states administer the programs, the federal government gives the states the money, the states dole it out, and I'm sure that everything goes just fine and streamlined and nobody skims off the top, right? Well, there, my friends, is the reason why the blue states keep getting bluer, and because they are using often one of the ways they keep getting bluer is because they use federal money to increase their Democrat votes. My next meme says shut down SNAP, then have everyone reapply in person with an ID, then perform background checks. A clean start is needed. It's a little extreme. I get it. Because then you're going to go all the way to the bottom and you're going to have the people who really need it not getting it and having to reapply for it. That is why we need to start from the top, start finding ways to cut back on the program, be more strict, start evaluating the people who are on it, get the illegal immigrants off of it, and start from the top up, find the fraud, get rid of it, and take that power away from the federal government. My next meme says Elon Musk is like what Elon Musk is quoting this. It's like what Milton Friedman said. Money is most poorly spent when you're spending someone else's money on people you don't know. That's the federal government. Great example. I'll extrapolate a little bit. When government officials aren't spending their own money, they're spending your money. They're spending the money they print at the Fed. They're not relying, they're not doing the work to truly create policies, even though they always say, oh, get us elected and we'll create jobs. But they really don't work on policies that create jobs or strengthen your freedoms or liberties, and they definitely don't work on things that strengthen the free market system, because it's way too easy to manipulate the market system, the capitalist system, the economic system in America. I'll repeat that again and slowly. It's way too easy to manipulate the economic system in America through government programs instead of creating laws that strengthen freedoms, personal liberties, and the free market and the capitalist society in America. And again, that's why Elon Musk said this, because they're always spending somebody else's money, and it's just too easy to do that. The next meme up, Trump's warning Obamacare is collapsing. This, my friends, is another part of this continuing resolution that's going on, that the Democrats are trying to hold on to Obamacare. They're trying to get all this medical funding, and through the big, of course, it all goes through big pharma, big medicine, big, the medical, and we need the medical system. We have a declining health system. We have a declining health in America. Our population's aging. I've heard all of that. Once again, in America, people have gotten too dependent on the healthcare system to make themselves healthy, instead of empowering themselves and doing what they need to do to to um, to take control of their own health and ensure their own medical freedom, and to be able to not only make themselves healthy, but make themselves healthily, not a word, I know, but healthily independent of the federal government healthcare system. But the Democrats want our healthcare system funded with taxpayer dollars. And that's part of what they're doing because Obamacare is collapsing because costs are going up so much and care is going down in that particular system. We don't really have Obamacare. We have the remnants of Obamacare, but the elected officials have kept just enough of the remnants of Obamacare to be able to move the money around. And as a result, it's collapsing because it's loosely tied and they're doing anything they can to prop it up. That's the other reason why the Democrats need this CR to pass with their control. My next meme says when Biden was firing federal workers for refusing the vaccine, not one Democrat spoke up. Now they say firing federal workers for wasting taxpayer money is the end of democracy as we know it. A point well made that once again, everybody wants to complain about the narrative or how the narrative makes them feel. But then when the tide turns, they just shove that anger on somebody else. The next meme, as long as the government subsidizes insurance companies for Obamacare, insurance has no reason to lessen our healthcare costs. An added point on what I was saying earlier, the more we fund the healthcare system through taxpayer dollars, and that can be debated. I get it. We've generations of people on some form of federal health care, which has made a very dependent part of our society. Instead of creating a system where healthcare costs are low enough and insurance premiums are low enough because the free market system has the entire population funding those healthcare industries on people that are working hard and prices are kept low because of the free market system. We'd be there today. I know there's argument on that from somewhere. We'd be there today if we didn't have generation after generation after generation allowing our federal government to get more involved in the funding of our health care, whether it's government programs or whether it's government kicking back to the insurance companies for whatever reason and subsidizing our insurance companies. We would have better healthcare costs if that weren't happening. Go to rncstore.com if you want to find ways to improve your health through apricot seeds. If you know, you know. Go to rncstore.com/WWFA. My next meme is a quote from John Kennedy. I'm not going to read it. The gist of it is John Kennedy thinks that because he tried coming across with a bill where our senators and our congressmen would not get paid during a government shutdown. I'll add to that. Not only should they not be getting paid during the shutdown, they should have to stay their rear ends in D.C. and work it out. Although there's another meme that I had out, I don't know if I'm going to have it up here in a minute or not, where the rules basically say that the congressmen and senators are supposed to spend a lot of their time back in their districts. Either way, it should change during a shutdown. They shouldn't get paid, and they should have to stay in D.C. And Senator Kennedy has won a bill that says they won't get paid. The next meme is by Chris Ann Hall from Liberty Addict. It says, can I please point out truth and the lies of the current political manipulation? This is not the longest government shutdown in America. Please don't be manipulated. I got some facts for you. Here they are in this meme. From 1789 to 1865, the federal government was shut down for 8 to 10 months every year. From 1865 to 1910, the federal government was shut down for 6 to 8 months every year. It wasn't until 1930 that the government stayed open 12 months a year. So don't tell me we are suffering an emergency or catastrophe. We are actually moving in the right direction. My point of pointing this out is if you look at the timeline, 1789, 1965, 1910, 1930, We go from a time period when government could shut down because there weren't as many bureaucracies. There weren't as many government programs. And if you look after 1930 and on, the government bureaucracies grew in number and size, as did government programs. So we needed to have government open all the time because of the fact that we had more bureaucracies and more programs. The next is a picture of Chuck Schumer holding a gun to the Louisiana Capitol's head. It says, free health care for all illegals or the country gets it. Next meme. Um, this is why air traffic controllers and other federal workers didn't receive a paycheck today. It goes to all the spending that the Democrats want. Um, Healthcare for illegals, transgender for all, DEI abroad, liberal news bailouts, climate handouts, activist kickbacks, miscellaneous radical policies. That's just on the Democrat side. I'm sure there's waste in there on the Republican side. I'm not going to give them a pass. But that being said, there's $1.5 trillion in wasteful spending. The meme says woke BS, but let's face it, I don't care whether it's woke, whether it's DEI or LGBTQ, or whether it's right-wing conservative waste. Waste is waste. It's all BS, and we should get rid of anything that is not pertinent to the funding of government where the needs of the people are being met. I have a meme for Patriot Mobile. Please switch your cell phone service to Patriot Mobile. Go to patriotmobile.com/WWFA. Right now, you get 2 months free, I think it is, if you do that. Uh, Here's a meme which kind of made the point of what I said earlier about the Affordable Care Act. It's people in line for the Affordable Care Act. One says, I get to keep my doctor. We know that's not true. Two, I'm going to save money. Not true. Finally, we are giving the government, covering the poor. Not always happening. And this will lower healthcare costs, and we know that it doesn't. And that, my friends, is the last meme of this show. Wrapping up this show with some answers and thoughts for questions I asked in the beginning. One, when they start talking about how many people are on SNAP, or how many people are on government assistance, or how many people are affected by the government shutdown, let's start throwing back the question, why isn't our government doing better in protecting people's freedoms and liberties, creating uh, fostering support, we'll say, or harboring support for improving policies that will improve our free market system so less people will need government assistance. And when they start talking about the court battles, start asking, why are we letting our courts have more control over our lives? We've already given bureaucratic agencies more control over our lives. Now we're giving the court systems and judges. One judge in a court system or a court is making decisions for over 300 million people. Keep that in mind. Throw the question back at them. Please share the show. Go visit the wellness company. Visit Patriot Mobile. Use my promo code. And by all means, please share the show. Please share it with somebody that you think would be interested in not only hearing my show. I'd really be grateful for it. And I want to thank you so much for spending your time with me. Have a great day. God bless America. And again, start asking those questions so that way we can demand better from our elected officials with a simple question. Why aren't you doing better so people won't need your government programs?